Hey, it's Mikey from Rockin' K. If you don't know who we are, we're a couple of people doing the off-grid DIY homesteading thing. What makes this different? We're doing it in Germany. So, we finished our heater this week, got everything done. Now it's time to do some maintenance on it. And we heat exclusively with wood here on the homestead. So, we'll give you a walk around of the heater and show you how we clean it up. That's coming up. All right, folks. So we heat exclusively with wood. There was a point in time where we used oil and wood. That was when we were transitioning. But for the last at least 4 years, we heat exclusively with firewood. So we accomplished that with a wood boiler. And this is the wood boiler. It is a Solarbayer HVS SE40, meaning it is a 40 kilowatt wood boiler. It doesn't look all that big, but she puts out some power. I know you guys in America, you guys do the wood boilers, but you do them outside. And so while it's outside, it has to have all the weather protection and everything like that. Here in Germany, they install them inside. So ours is sitting inside my wood barn. My wood barn is just a big barn. Most of the people here in Germany have them installed in their basement or their Heizungskeller, their heating basement, or in a technical room just off, that's inside the house. Mine, I got lucky. I had the wood barn and we were able to run all the pipes through the house in the ground because we were doing renovations and the ground was open. The floors were open. So we put mine, instead of putting it in the basement where we'd have to bring the firewood down to the stove, all the time. I got lucky enough and we installed it in a barn that I had that we were storing firewood in. And come on. We have the wood stove right where we have our wood. It is very ideal. So we've been burning the stove. I haven't cleaned the inside chamber or the smoke chamber in at least a month. So the directions or the instructions for the oven tell you to clean it every 30th load. And while some people say, oh, that's a month. No, mileage may vary on the oven. There's times where I light one fire a day. There's times where I'm lighting more than one fire a day. And it's really about how the thermostats are set in the house as well as how cold it is outside. But I have not, last week I did empty the lower chamber, and you can see there's not that much ash. Let me flip you around. So that's near 2 weeks or so of ash in there. And that's about, I don't know, maybe a half a 5-gallon bucket full. So, but we have more than one chamber on the stove. We have the upper chamber, which will open this up, and I'll show you. Let me get some light on this situation. So we have the upper chamber, and it looks like this. There is a slot in the bottom that you can see. That's for the exhaust gases to go through. And while it looks a little crusty in there, it actually stays just like that. Each cycle it burns the tar and the soot off of it. So it never gets any more than that inside. Now, on our stove here, on this particular stove, you have an arm that controls the exhaust flaps. So when you're lighting the stove and you have the door open, if you look in the back, you have that flap. So with that flap, let me position the light a little better here. So you have that flap, and what this arm does is closes that flap so that the exhaust gas goes down, around, and through the gas tubes to heat our water. And those tubes are back here underneath this cover. So let me pop the cover up. And this is part of our 30th day cleaning, or our 30th load. And our gas tubes are in here. Wow, she's still kind of warm still because we did burn it last night. But it is time to get her cleaned. And then we have one more chamber, and that's the chamber that I did empty the last time. And this is the lower chamber. This is the ash chamber. This is where 90% of the ash ends up. So here is about a week's worth of ash. Maybe a little more. Not much at all. So we're talking, this little area right here. That's our ash right here. So we're going to go ahead and get this all cleaned out. And I'll bring you along with me and explain everything to you. And when we fire it up, I'll explain how everything works. So let's get started. We'll get started with cleaning those gas tubes, these gas tubes. So I have to take these two nuts off. I'm going to install wing nuts on there. Just haven't yet. But let's get this open and I'll show you the gas tubes. So there's just two 13mm nuts on here. And they're not real snug, just enough to stop the smoke from coming out. That's why I said I'm going to switch them over to wing nuts. So we'll flip these tabs out of the way and pop the lid. Pick up our gasket and let's show you the inside. So down here are our gas tubes, and you can see right now our chamber is open. So if you look right here, that is that disc, and that's that hole in the back of the fire chamber. So let me go around and close that up. All right, now that our chamber's closed, you can see each one of these tubes, the smoke comes up those tubes and then goes into the chimney. And you can see we've been burning some nice dry wood. You can see that everything is just nice and dry. And that's what you want to see. You don't want to see any creosote or anything. These stoves tend to not make any creosote in the back because of the method of combustion. But you can even see, even here, we'll dip you in, and there's the chimney pipe. Chimney pipe's really clean. So let me get you in the stand, and we'll start pulling the turbulators, what they call turbulators, out of the stove. So inside here, we'll tip you down like that, like so. And let me get my hook And we'll pull out a turbulator. So what these do is these spin the exhaust gas to make sure that you're getting the most efficiency out of the stove. And all this is literally a spun piece of metal. So that's what I mean about the turbulator. And we do have you kind of tip sideways. But all it is a spun piece of metal that actually spins the smoke and keeps it up against the outside walls of those tubes. So I have to pull all, 6 of these, and then I'll show you cleaning that out. All right, so we got all 6 of the turbulators out, and you can see they're just a spun sheet metal. I mean, literally just creates a spin on the air. And then here, if you look down, that goes all the way down to the bottom. So what we need to do now is we have a special scraper that came with the oven, and it looks on the end just like this. So you will notice it is round, and it is to clean out those tubes. So what we will end up doing is, let me flip you around again, and we have these tubes right there. Let me get you a better angle, a little more light. So we have the tubes, and what you're going to do is put it in one of the tubes, let it go to the bottom, and just kind of run it through the tube. That is literally all it takes. And as long as you're burning a clean, good dry firewood, you will never have any problems cleaning these out. If you burn wood that is a little too green and not seasoned, what you will end up with is creosote in these tubes. And if that happens, you're going to have a bad day when it comes to cleaning these. Because, I mean, literally, folks, you can see how easy it is to clean. I'm just dropping it in, pushing that dusting of ash that I have in there. I mean, it's just a dusting. I mean, you can see how easy it's going in there. There is nothing to that. Nice free moving. So let me get the rest of this really quick, and we'll come back. All right, we got our shop vac and our brass brush. So you can see in there that there's a little bit of buildup on that wall right there, and it is literally just powder. If you look, I'm not even putting pressure on it, and it's falling off. So that's a good sign that your firewood is dry. So I'm just going to brush this off, because over time it'll build up and it'll turn into kind of like a rock. If there's any moisture, especially you want to do this when it comes springtime, because the stove will be off, and when the stove is off, you'll get a little bit of condensate inside, and the stuff will turn into a rock, and then you won't get it off. But you can see it is literally just falling off of it. Everything is really good and dry. Just brushing it really lightly off, making sure she's all clean. And that's all it really takes to get the sides clean. Now we'll take the shop vac, and you're not going to be able to hear me while I'm running the vac. But I'll suck all that loose ash out of there. And remember, I'm only doing the upper chamber with the shop vac, and like I said, you do this at your own risk. That's why I have a disclaimer. If you're going to do the lower chambers of your stove, please, please, please use an ash vacuum. So we'll turn the shop vac on. And I guess you might be able to hear me over it. Flip you around. And we're just going to suck that ash out of there. All right, so all that loose ash is out of there, and that's what it looks like when it's all cleaned up. And you can kind of see down those tubes. Let me see if we can. So she's all clean. Try to look down one of these tubes. Can't really look down them. But all that loose ash and everything's out of there. So all we have to do is drop the turbulators back in there and close this up. So I always start up at the top of the stove. Because of gravity, everything falls down. So now we're going to take these turbulators, and it is literally as easy as lining them up and dropping them in. That's all there is to it. And then anything that we knock it through these tubes will end up in a bottom chamber, which is why I start at the top. But you only do this, I think they say to do it once a month. Or every 30th load. I just, I watch, and, because my firewood is very dry, I don't have to worry about it that much. If you don't season your wood and you're having to burn a greener wood, you're going to definitely have to do this every 30th load. But that's all that in there. Now we have the rope gasket and the door. So we set the door down there, then close the gasket in on it, tuck that all in, center up the door, flip the tabs over, like so. And then I just like to hold that gasket down to make sure that the ends are meeting, because it's nothing but I think fiberglass rope. I think that's what they make these out of. And it doesn't take much pressure, just enough to close in on that rope a little bit. And you can tell when you're touching the rope, if the rope moves, it's not tight enough. If the rope doesn't move, you got it. So snug it up just a touch, and that is the top side done. Now all we really need to do is shovel out the main box and then clean out the bottom box. We'll put the lid back on, the insulative lid. And that's the top done. Now for this part, folks, this is the part that you definitely don't want to use your shop vac, because I'll show you, hopefully, I don't know if it'll show up, but I did have a fire in here last night, and if you look, yeah, you can see it. You see those couple of embers and stuff kind of glowing in there? If I was to use my shop vac to clean this out, it's definitely going to catch the bag on fire, so we won't be using the shop vac. I know I'm beating a dead horse, but... So we'll shed some light on the subject. I usually put my light up there. Now I'm going to shovel out all this, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I do. So we'll set you up on a tripod. I'm probably going to be right up in the way. So what I'm going to use to get this firebox cleaned is a shovel without a handle. And that's literally all it is. So it is a shovel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in here and grab my ash, and all of this will go in my steel wheelbarrow. Okay, now the chamber's about 90% clean. I'll flip you around, and you can see there's the chamber and there's the slot. You want to make sure that that slot is clear, and that little bit of ash you want in there. That little bit of ash will protect the bricks from impact and such. It's kind of like a little cushion. You never want to clean the stove like 100% clean, because believe it or not, the ash is a little bit protective. So I'm going to set the camera up down low so that you can see the bottom chamber and what's going on there. So now we're down here on the bottom chamber, and that is about a week's worth of ash right here in the bottom. So what we'll do is we'll get this all cleaned out and we'll get her fired. So all I usually do cleaning out the bottom is put my little shovel there. We'll shovel out what we can. Clean out the chamber up top. Now this is going to be dirty because we just drug a bunch of stuff into it. But this technically is the combustion chamber because it blows the fire down. Now what I'm going to do is pull these bricks out because there's some underneath the bricks. I've only done this, I had to do this one other time before, and it's just because I really want to make sure she's clean, because I will not do this again until spring. And it's as easy as just popping the brakes back in. One, two, three, and four. So this slot right here, that's very important. That's your airflow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hook and I'm just going to make sure that it's 100% clean. And then we are done. All right, now that the stove is clean, we can go ahead and light a fire, and we'll kind of talk about this wood stove while we do it. So what I will do is flip you around. Now this is a downdraft stove, so the fire goes down. So we need to get a little bit of kindling, and luckily from cutting wood last night, I have a bunch of very small, thin kindling. So we'll take some kindling and throw it in here. All right there in the middle, kind of like that. We just need something for the little fire starters to catch on. I'm sure you guys have lit fires before, so it is nothing special with this stove. It is literally just get her going. So with this stove, because you can fill it and it can stall out, what I usually do is I light a small fire first. And I'll get us some of our tumbleweeds. These are great. These are a paraffin wax on little shreds of wood. Then grab a little more of the kindling and some cardboard, because this fire will be a little bit difficult because there's no embers at all to rely on. And we'll let that cook up a little bit. So we, as I was saying earlier, we use nothing but wood to heat. And it is for two reasons. One, it's cheap. Two, I don't rely on oil, and it's much greener. Better than burning dead dinosaurs. So let me give you a walk around and explain all of this to you. So what we have first is the controls. They're very straightforward. It is literally, you hit the button, it says fire. I want fire. She's off and running. It does have some alternate displays. So here we have, this is the temperature of the water jacket. This is the temperature of the exhaust gas and how fast the fan is. The fan is at 110% right now. We're starting up. This is the temperature of that water storage tank. And this is saying that it's on. And this is saying that I don't have a fan in that pipe, because that is an option. All right, fire's starting to roar. We're about 32 degrees on the exhaust gas, so we'll wait for that to come up. So how does it all work? Well, I showed you in taking this apart, there is tubes in the back of the oven. So what happens is you load the front of the stove, the fire is brought down, and it comes down to the bottom of the stove and into that little chamber that I showed you where I pulled the bricks out. That's the little fire chamber. And then the smoke comes around the front, runs along the bottom, and then comes up through those tubes. Those tubes cut through a big water jacket. So it's a big square box with the tubes through it. And what happens is the exhaust gas coming up through those tubes heats up that metal box, thus heating my water. Then, of course, smoke goes out the chimney. It is a very good design. It's kind of opposite what you guys have in America. In America, you have tubes in your exhaust gas, and the exhaust gas blows on the outside of the tubes and heats the water inside of the tubes. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Can't tell you which is more efficient or not. I just know I don't burn as much firewood as you Americans guys do. So, when it's all said and done, this is what they call a Lotomat. There is a spring in this pump house. So you have an electric pump over here. This is the water to the top of the stove. And what you have is the water comes in this tube from my hot water storage tank, or it comes down this tube and into the bottom of the stove, depending upon the position of the spring in this valve. The spring, as it heats up, expands just like a thermostat in a car and allows water to come in from the tank instead of the stove. So what this does is it turns on at 40 degrees Celsius. And then what happens is it circulates it from the top of the stove into the bottom of the stove until it hits about 65 degrees Celsius, at which it closes with that thermostat. It closes this, so the water no longer comes down, and the water comes in from my hot water storage tank and flows this way. So we follow this tube up, and we see here's a T. This is the cycle of the water. It comes up out of the top of the stove, comes across and down while that valve is open, and it does its circle just inside the stove. What that allows it to do is get this water good and hot, and when it gets to 65, and it stops the water from being able to go down because the valve closes here, the water then does this. It comes in from the tank, comes up, and then ends up going out the top and across that line and into my tank. So the Lotomat is a very important part. It's just a thermostatically controlled pump. Basically, it runs in a circle on the wood boiler until it hits a proper temperature, because you don't want to pump cold water around through your house anyway, until it gets to the right temperature, and then it pumps it through the rest of the house. All right, fire's almost there. So this starts pumping the water around, and what it ends up doing is taking the water in from the tank on this pipe, putting the water back into the tank on this pipe. Both pipes come out of this side, so you can see there's a valve there, comes out of the bottom of the tank, and there's a valve there, goes into the top. So like you can see, I set up controls or monitors. So Spice Your Buffer is this actual water tank. And what this says is that the top of the tank is 50 degrees and the bottom of the tank is 27. This is Celsius, by the way. Okay? And then remember how I was telling you about the circle for the boiler. Here is the circle for the boiler. So the circle for the boiler, at moment it's not pumping, but it would come out of the boiler. So that's the line up on the top. This line right here, going to the top of the tank. This will tell me how much, what temperature I'm putting into the tank. And then this temperature is what's being fed to the boiler. And that's, let me move the shot back. That's this pipe down here coming off the bottom of the tank. So this will tell me what I'm feeding it and what it's coming out of the oven. Of course, the higher this is, the higher this tends to be. Then, while this does say house, this is actually what, I'm going to change this label. This is my distribution manifold. And what the temperatures are is going into the manifold and coming out of the manifold. So basically, this is the water going out to the circuits to generate my heat. And then this is what the temperature of the water is coming back. So this tells me kind of how my system is flowing. Right now you can see all these values are low. The fire's been out. So the last time it is now around noon, and I have not lit a fire yet today. So it all sounds complicated, right? No, it's really, 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 really easy. Basically, the boiler has a water jacket in it, a water tank that is heated by the fire, and it is circulated just in the stove until it gets hot enough. Once it is hot enough, it puts it in this tank behind me. This tank is nothing more than a big battery. They call it a buffer tank because this way I'm not pumping straight 70-degree water into the house, because of course my floor heating would have a meltdown and my floor would be destroyed. I do pump the water into the house now at about 60 degrees Celsius, but that's because it is only 4 degrees Celsius outside. We are almost freezing, right? So that's all the water heating and my hot water storage up there. So I did a little series of me doing all this, my heating wall and everything. This is my heating wall. This is where everything leaves the tank and goes and does its work. So what I was talking about, the manifold, so the water coming to the manifold and away from the manifold, this down here is the manifold. All these pumps mount on the manifold. Basically what it is the hot water comes in here, and this is the in, and then it gives an in to each pump on the right side. So here you can see where there is no pump. So this right side is the hot water coming out, and this is the return water coming back from the house. So each of the 3 positions has these same 2 fittings. They're just inside here. So like this one, this side is the hot out to the house radiators, and then this is the cold coming back. And with these mixers, what they do is they circulate water in a loop, and when it needs it, it uses this mixer to take water off of that hot side and add it into the loop to make it hot, or the temperature desired. And then this will automatically adjust itself as to how much hot water it needs to maintain the temperature that we're looking for. So like this is the radiator heat inside the house. This I run at about 60 degrees Celsius. So it's using a lot of water off of this side, because by the time it makes it back and it's run through all the radiators, it's coming back and it's relatively cool. And because it's such a high temperature system, it uses a lot of that heat energy. Now, on the other hand, this is my floor heating side. And on my floor heating side, we keep this at about 30 degrees, 31 or 32 degrees Celsius. So if I was to have the water come directly off of the manifold and through the system, it's going to be way, way, way too hot. So with that said, we need this mixer, will keep it to where it's just sipping little bits of water off the hot side and circulating the water above this, above this line at the 30 degrees or 31, 32 degrees Celsius that I need it to circulate. Not complicated at all. These mixers are a godsend. So that's what all of these pipes are. So the closest, these two pipes here feed off of this one here. And what you have is you have the hot coming out. It comes down and then feeds this distribution manifold. And each one of these tubes is a loop in my floor heating in that party room / man cave area. Then, after it makes its loop around through the floor, it comes back on this cold side and runs through the tube, back up, and roundy round it goes. So it will only add hot water to this setup when it is below 30 degrees. It makes it a little more efficient. These are all thermostatic valves that control the rate of flow through the manifold on the return side. And what this does is allows me to use thermostats in the room. And so the water circulates through at about 32, 31, 32, but that's really warm for a room. So what happens is in the room, there's a thermostat, and when the room gets to the right temperature, it closes these valves. And there's 3 different zones. That's why you see there's red tape, no tape, and then blue tape. So this is the big room in the party room. This is the kitchen area of the party room. And then this is the bathroom. So I can control each one of those areas independently. And so most people like a bathroom to be a little warmer than any other room in the house, because that's the room that you shower in and everything like that. So it is better to have it a little bit warmer, because you don't have the insulative qualities of clothing when you're in the shower, right? So it is not a complicated system. It really isn't. And then when it comes to the house system, the main house and the radiators, that's these other 2 pipes right here. And what this does is this circulates at really hot temperatures. So this circulates at about 60 degrees Celsius. It was around 55, but I turned it up since it's a little colder. Now the way these work is this loop runs through the house, and instead of using these thermostatic valves here in this area, every room has a thermostatic valve. So if you're familiar with radiator heat, there's a thermostatic valve on the inflow, on the flow to the radiators. And what this does is it will close the flow coming in the radiator when the room is warm enough. If the room is not warm enough, it opens that up and it flows the hot water, in this case 60-degree water, into the radiator on the wall. And that's how that works. So the great thing about these Velo Pico pumps. The Pico Plus, these pumps, they're super efficient. You can set the pressure or the head pressure that you want. So mine are set to, I don't know, I think 3 meters, 3.3 meters. And what this does is it keeps a certain amount of pressure on the outgoing side. And if all my thermostatic valves open in the house, the pump comes up and it rushes, and it makes sure that every room is getting heat. Well, if they're all closed, then the pump slows down because it senses that there's pressure in front of it. Makes this very efficient. The pumps are worth their money. Most heating pumps run in 3 speeds. It has a 3-speed switch. The thing with that is the 3 speeds are about 15 watts, 20 watts, and 40 watts when it comes to electricity. These pumps, which replaced other pumps, this one, the max I've seen is 11 watts. This one I've seen up near 20. Now, mind you, all the radiators were open, but when it's sitting idle, it's only burning like, when it's in normal heating mode, it burns like 10 watts. It's a no-brainer. So let's check on this stove. It is now at 64 degrees on the exhaust temperature. We haven't really been paying attention. So we'll look. Fire's going. Now what I'll do is I'll grab my firewood for the day. And my wagon, I only fill it up once. And it usually gets me through the whole entire day. So there's my little wagon. I'm going to fill it up and then we'll go back to the stove. Okay, wagon's full. Well, not full, but let me flip you around. It's easier. So that is about a day's worth of firewood. I might add a little more. I might use a little less. It just all depends on how everything runs. So we'll open up the firebox. And we have a nice little fire going in the bottom. So what we'll do is we'll start with some of the smaller pieces. I know you guys don't need this explained to you, but some people don't know. Start with some of the smaller pieces, throw them in there. I do have a couple of small pieces of pine to go along with it because pine works really well when it comes to starting a fire. Don't work real well to keep a fire going though. Pine burns really, really fast. So we'll get a bunch of this firewood in here. And this is where the stove really takes off. Because then it's got all the fuel. It kind of preheats it, which is kind of, because it's all in a closed chamber. So what ends up happening is the wood itself gets hot without burning. And then that's when you can really watch, once it does catch fully, that you can watch this exhaust gas temperature just start climbing, and it'll climb fast. And sometimes you got to watch it because it will get up around 250 degrees Celsius on the chimney, which chimney's rated to 400, so not that big a deal, but not ideal. So we got a load of wood in there. Pull our handle out. You can hear a roar to life. We're off and running. That is for later on. The wood box is pretty much full, and you can watch those numbers slowly tick up. 62.1, 3, 5. So she's up and running. I love my wood heat. I know that I am not reliant on oil companies. I'm not reliant on anything other than cutting my wood and supplying, I don't know, a grand total of, I think the oven itself consumes, I don't know, maybe 100 watts. I'm looking to see if it actually tells me on the side, because there's a data plate here. So 40 watts. 40 watts. Let me show you. Turn some light on. Oh, it's going to make me adjust this. 40 watts. That is not bad at all. So, I thought the oven was like at least 100 watts, but the oven is 40 watts. So we got 40 watts. We got the control voltage for this is 0.4, and these are probably combined 0.4. So we'll just call that 2 watts. So we got 42 watts between this and the wall. Then these typically run under 20 watts each, because you got to remember there's also the pump control, and the pump control, although it's not always moving. So 20 watts, I mean, it's another 40. So holy crap, we're under 100 watts total. And if I was to try to run that off my solar and my batteries, man, I could run forever and have heat in my house. So I'm not relying on anybody. I can cut my firewood and stack it. Grows in the forest. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. Same forests. And yeah, it's great. I love it. So let me go over here and check on this oven and see what the temperature's at now. So temperature's at 76.4. We're getting there. The stove or the oven goes into automatic mode. So at 105 degrees on the exhaust gas temperature. It is a fail-safe. It's in case your fire doesn't start. It doesn't keep everything running, trying to keep the fire going. So it's a little more efficient. If it doesn't reach 105 degrees within 40 minutes, the oven turns off. Just a safety feature. But that is how I heat with wood. That is how I maintain this oven. And I will spend, I don't know what we were here, 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes or so each month, clean everything out. I do clean the bottom out every other week. So every 2 weeks, I clean out the bottom. And about once a month, I clean out the top and the gas tubes in the back. Other than that, it's light a fire and go. And you saw how easy it was to light the fire. Once there's embers in it, it's even easier. Normally, I can just start a little bit, throw the wood in, turn on the fans, and I go away. I'm done. While a lot of people will just say, I like my oil, I like my natural gas. This stuff is getting really expensive. So, I mean, this is how I like to heat my house. I like to be off grid. I like to be self-reliant. I like to not have to rely on anybody. That's what off-gridding is about. I don't have to worry about the oil man showing up and filling my tanks up. I don't have to worry about whether there's a war going on in Ukraine and they cut the gas pipelines, because that is a thing. Natural gas was a scarcity when this Ukraine thing started out. Natural gas prices shot through the roof. People were in a panic. Not this guy. I heat with wood. Just the way it is. But that is the skinny on how we keep the homestead hot, how we kind of do it off-grid, and it will be 100% off-grid by summertime. I promise you that, because the solar will be taking over for all of this, including the lights and stuff. So that we are 100% off-grid inside this room. We will be moving everything else off little bits at a time off-grid, but that's how we do it. That's how we heat. And so I'm going to wrap this one up with saying, if you're thinking about family, if you're thinking about friends, give them a WhatsApp. Give them a WhatsApp. Whatever works for you. It is Sunday. I'm going to reach out to my family and tell them what's up. You might want to too. So until the next one, auf Wiedersehen.